Welcome to St Mary's College, Blairs. Blairs was the national seminary for Scotland, the junior national seminary. So to explain, that was for the boys who were in secondary school age, basically, 12 to 18. And then after they finished here, they would then end up going to the senior seminaries, most of which in the early days were on the continent, but then there were a few in Scotland as well later on. So Blairs dates back to 1829, but this place, the Blairs estate, is in very much, according to this book here, which I've just picked up to bring along, the centenary book, it in fact describes it as hallowed ground, because this estate, the Blairs estate, has been in Catholic possession since 1167, when William the Lion gave it to the Knights Templar. And eventually in 1535, because the Knights were driven out, it ended up being sold to the Mingus family, and it's been in the Mingus family ever since until 1827, when John Mingus, who was the last in his line, he then left the whole estate here to the church in Scotland for the education of young boys for the priesthood. So behind me you'll see the statue of Our Lady of Aberdeen. It's called that in Aberdeen, but in the rest of the Catholic world it's known as Our Lady of Good Success. And the original statue, which has a history in Aberdeen, in the Bridge of Dee, there was a small chapel there, but at the time of the Reformation it was smuggled over to Belgium and it still remains there. But there's copies of it, and indeed several copies in Blairs. So the college was called, the proper name for Blairs was St Mary's College, Blairs, and it was dedicated to Mary. Behind the statue you've also got the chapel. That was built in 1901, so it's the first part of the new Blairs. We'll see the old Blairs later on. It was opened, as I said, in 1901, and it was primarily paid for by a very generous benefactor, Monsignor James Lennon from Liverpool, and he's actually buried in the small graveyard beside the college. The college itself, the tower, used to be in the centre of the building. Okay, so in 1927, the part on the right was extended because the number of students that came to Blairs was outgrowing the size of the building. The tower, though, is actually interesting in itself. Above the door, you've got the papal coat of arms of Leo XIII, who unfortunately died just before the college was officially opened. And then either side you've got the coats of arms of Bishop Chisholm, who was the rector here at Blairs between 1890 and 1899, and then became the Bishop of Aberdeen until he died in 1918. So he maintained very much as bishop an interest in continuing this project that he'd started. And indeed when he was first made bishop, he tried to stay on as rector as well, but after a few months he had to recognise that he couldn't do both jobs properly, and he then gave it over to another Aberdeen priest. The tower, though, you've got the two coats of arms, as say Bishop Chisholm, and then the other side you've got John Mingus, the man that I mentioned earlier on. And then going up the tower you'll see the emblem of Mary on the corners, and then another papal coat of arms, and obviously crowning the whole thing in its glory is the papal crown, the papal tiara. And when this was all built, none of these trees existed, so I mean this was very much a landmark on Dee side, with the papal crown overseeing the whole thing, you know, and it could be seen people coming out on the road, on the South Dee side road or the North Dee side road. The building itself is reasonably easy to explain the way it was used. The bottom floor was the living quarters of the boys. The study hall, as the name suggests, along here was where they did all their homework and exams and things like that. Then classrooms, and then further back, but we can't see it, but the back part of the building was wash places, locker rooms, all sorts of things like that. And then the middle floor was the priests' living quarters, and at one time there were about 15 or 16 priests who were on the staff here at Blairs, because all the teachers at the beginning were priests, members of the clergy, and then bit by bit as time went on, and because of the need for priests in parishes, some nuns started teaching, as well as some lay members of staff, and I was one of those lay members of staff. I should perhaps have said I was a student here at Blairs. I arrived here in 1968 as a third year, having been at Lang Bank in first and second year, and then I left in 72. I decided not to go on to senior seminary, but after I'd been at university and teacher training college, I was invited to come back here and teach geography, and that's what I did from 77 until it closed in 1986. So I was one of those lay members of staff. The top floor was basically the dormitories. And then the bit over on the left hand side there, the second floor and the the first floor and the second floor, that's the library, a purpose-built library. I also wanted to just read out a little bit here. This is in 1831 from the Catholic Directory, which again was actually started by a member of staff here at Blairs, and indeed throughout its history, and indeed even including the present person who looks after the Catholic Directory, they were all at Blairs. And the Catholic Directory says here, no pains or expense have been spared for the proper accommodation and domestic comfort of the students, and the playgrounds are delightful. While the prospectus is given as, besides the Greek and Latin classics, French and Italian and Spanish if required, geography with the use of globes, philosophy and in all its branches, and divinity. So I'm quite happy as a geography teacher to see their geography with the use of globes was there right from the beginning in 1831.